नमस्कार. Namaste. I'm seeing it on YouTube. Okay. So, once again, namaste to all of you and welcome to today's session on Mahatma letters. We will continue our study of letter number 85A and B onwards up to 86 and 87. I hope to complete all of them today. So let us begin our session as usual with the universal invocation. O hidden life, vibrant in every atom. O hidden light, shining in every creature. O hidden love, embracing all in oneness. May each who feels himself as one with thee know he is also one with every other. So here we are. In our last session, we have studied some questions, the doubts which Sinnett had posed in his letter 85A and the replies that Mahatma Ji gave in letter 85B. So the last point we covered, it was about Mahatma Ji. He says that Devachan for every person is unique. It cannot be generalized. It cannot be explained. He's trying to explain the unexplainable. It is just like trying to describe the life of all human beings by describing the life of Napoleon. So, which is not right. And he says that there are millions of emotional states, happiness and misery. And their source can either be physical or it can be spiritual. Because just like we have our spiritual faculties and senses, similarly, we have the spiritual counterpart, that is our spiritual faculties and senses. So only those emotions will survive in Devachan who have their source in the spiritual senses and faculties. And also he adds that even if different people are experiencing the same emotion, for example, love, they will experience it differently. And he gave the example of the laborer, the millionaire, the philanthropic nurse who cares for humanity, and the new bride, her definition of love, and also a music lover. So his love is for an abstract thing. It is for music. Okay. And then the bliss of Devachan that each person feels, it is of varying degrees, from the highest to the lowest. And at the lowest stage of bliss of Devachan, from there begins the states of Avicci, that is misery. But then in the end, he adds that we must remember that all the feelings are relative. There is neither good nor evil, and there is neither happiness nor misery per se. So this is in short what we did last time. Now we will continue from there. So he's trying to describe how many different states can there be in Devachan. Okay, I'll share my slides with you. I think we are on slide number 54. Okay, so the last statement he said was, every feeling is relative. There is neither good nor evil, happiness nor misery per se. Then he adds that the transcendent, evanescent bliss of an adulterer who by his act murders the happiness of a husband is no less spiritually born for its criminal nature. If a remorse of conscience, the latter proceeding always from the sixth principle, has only once been felt during the period of bliss, and really spiritual love, born in the sixth and fifth, however polluted by the desires of the fourth or calm roop, then this remorse must survive and will accompany insistently the scenes of pure love. Now, one point to understand here is that conscience is the perception that proceeds from the sixth principle, that is buddhi. It is what we call is our inner voice, that voice which always knows and it pricks if you have done something wrong, even if no one has watched you. That is conscience. So this conscience always has its source in the spiritual, in the sixth principle or buddhi. And Mahatma Ji gives the example of a person who commits adultery. Even if a person of criminal nature, such as this, who's committing adultery, he will also go to Devachan. That means he will be born spiritually. So there's a condition. If the love he felt for the other person was spiritual love. And moreover, if he felt his guilty conscience, okay, because he was committing an act of adultery. So if he felt his guilty conscience, which arises from the sixth principle, then that guilt too will always accompany him in his bliss of Devachan, because that guilt feeling has its source in the spiritual faculty. So guilt along with that bliss, both will be felt in Devachan. Then he adds, I need not enter into details, since a physiological expert, as I take you to be, is telling Sinnett, need hardly have his imagination and intuition prompted by a psychological observer of my sort. So Mahatma Ji is only hinting as to what is to follow, leaving Sinnett to search his own soul. Search in the depths of your conscience and memory and try to see what are the scenes that are likely to take their firm hold upon you. When once more in their presence, you find yourself living them over again. That means in Devachan. And that ensnared, you will have forgotten all the rest, this letter among other things. Since in the course of events, it will come far later on in the panorama of your resurrected life. That means when the ego is reborn in Devachan, it will once again go over all the events of life in detail. And only those memories or events or emotions having their sources in the spiritual can be lived in the Devachanic state. So this letter, it will be forgotten because it is just a normal letter. Source is not spiritual. So this will, among other things, it will come very much later. That means during the Devachanic period, but it will not carry on in Devachan. It will be forgotten. I have no right to look into your past life. Whenever I may have caught glimpses of it, I have invariably turned my eyes away, for I have to deal with the present AP Senate. Also, and by far more, a new invention than the ex-APS, not with the ancient man. So we know that though the master can look into the past of an aspirant, yet he considers the aspirant only as he is now. He considers only the aspirant's current ability and determination to grow spiritually, like he is considering Sinnett, irrespective of what the aspirant might have committed in his previous life or in the past. But that is of no concern. Only his determination to grow, to walk on the spiritual path, and his present ability is of concern to the Mahatma. So this is an extremely important message for all of us. The effects of, if any aspirant or any person, maybe Senate, or even it applies to all of us, if any wrong has been committed in the past, not only in this life, also in the previous life, then its result is sure to follow. Okay, but there is great hope that we can reinvent ourselves into an entirely new person by treading the spiritual path. And the moment we show that determination, the Mahatmas are there for us. They are ready to guide us. They are ready to take us forward on that path. Okay, so this is the thing of great hope. Yes, love and hatred are the only immortal feelings, but the gradations of tones along the 7 by 7 scales of the whole keyboard of life are numberless. And since it is those two feelings, or to be correct, shall I risk being misunderstood again and say those two poles of man's soul, which is a unity, that mold the future state of man, that molds the future state of man, whether for Devachan or Avicii, then the variety of such states must also be inexhaustible. So we are categorically told here that love and hate, they are the only immortal feelings. Why they are immortal? Because their source is in the sixth principle. So that is going to endure. Whereas the lower quaternary, up to the Kamru, that will perish. So what is this what is he calling it? The whole keyboard of life, the 7 by 7 scales. So 7 by 7 scale, it refers to our existence of life. It is there on the 7 planes. Okay. Though as yet we are not conscious on the higher planes, we are living only on the lower 3, but we know that there are 7 planes of our being. And moreover, each of these 7 planes, they are again subdivided, or they have 7 subplanes. So total 7 subdivisions in each of the 7 planes makes 49. So this is referring to 7 by 7 scale of 49. And influenced by this 49 subdivisions, there are innumerable gradations of love and hate, both. As we have already seen earlier, that love experienced by different people is of different flavors, and the same applies to hate. Like we saw the love experienced by the young bride and the nurse and the millionaire and the laborer. Okay, so same way, hate also will be experienced differently by different people. And all these differences in experience, they are due to this 7 by 7 scale. That is total 49. Now, love and hate, they are simply the polarity of one's own soul. What is the human soul? It is our manas, or the mind. Mind is the human soul. And mind is one. It is, though in speaking we say higher mind and lower mind, but there are no two minds. They are just the polarities. What one experiences during life, that determines his state of Devachan or Avicii. And as we can experience innumerable grades of love and hate, therefore, the states of Devachan and Avicii are also innumerable, because they are all dependent on what we are experiencing as love and hate during our lifetime. Now, in the next point, Sinnett raises the doubt, nor can we call it a full, but only a partial remembrance. Love and hatred are only immortal feelings, the only survivors from the wreck of the Yi Dhamma, or phenomenal world. Even after the phenomenal world perishes, the feelings of love and hate persist. This Mahatma Ji has already explained above. Okay, so imagine yourself in Devachan then, with those you may have loved with such immortal love, with the familiar shadowy scenes connected with them for a background, and a perfect blank for everything else relating to your interior, social, political, and literary life. And the reference is given from the letter, that is from the notes. So Sinnett's doubt is why Mahatma Ji calls it only a partial remembrance. Okay, so, and this love and hatred are the immortal feelings, survivors from the wreck of the Yamma. The Yi Dhamma is the phenomenal world. So anything connected with the phenomenal world, it is going to perish. It falls under the category of the lower quaternary. But love and hatred, if they have their source in the higher principle, then they will survive. So that is why they are called the survivors from the wreck of the phenomenal world. So Mahatma Ji answers to this. He says, for having eliminated from your past life the Ratigans and Reeds, who with you have never transcended beyond the boundaries of the lower portion of your fifth principle with its vehicle, the calm. What is it but the partial remembrance of a life? Okay. Lower portion of your fifth principle. Fifth principle is the manas, the human soul, and its vehicle is the fourth principle, that is calm. So it is referring to the lower mental, the calm manas. Now, we know that Sinnett, he was the editor of the newspaper, The Pioneer, and he worked there for 11 years. And during his work, The Pioneer became the leading the Anglo-Indian daily newspaper. So he really worked very hard. He poured his heart out into that. And then in 1882, that was the time around this letter is written in September. In 1882, another person called William Henry Rattigan, he became the owner of this newspaper, The Pioneer. And then in the following year, Sinnett, he left his position with the paper after 11 long years. So surely it must not have been with very nice feelings. He would have felt quite sad or heartbroken about this. Now, all these feelings and thoughts, they originate from the calm manas, the feelings which Sinnett would have experienced when he had to leave the newspaper. So they originate from the lower fifth principle, from the calm manas. Therefore, they are not going to persist in Devachan because they will be associated with the calm roop because they belong to the lower manas. Their source is in the lower manas. And that is the reason memory in Devachan is termed as partial remembrance. Because in Devachan, Sinnett will have no memory of what happened. He had to leave the newspaper and that person, Rattigan, how he behaved with him. He will have no memory of that. And therefore, whatever he remembers in Devachan is, Mahatmaji calls it as partial remembrance. The lines marked with your reddest pencil are also disposed of, for how can you dispute the fact that music and harmony are for a Wagner, a Paganini, the king of Bavaria, and so many other true artists and melomans, an object of the profoundest spiritual love and veneration. With your permission, I will not change one word in clause 9. So in this point number 9, which Sinnett had raised, Mahatmaji is saying that the love one feels for abstract things like music, that will also persist as bliss in Devachan. These are the names of many great music lovers. The famous musicians and composers, they are able to pour their heart into music. They compose masterpieces in music because music is the language of the soul. And Master tells Sinnett that he cannot dispute this fact. So the love one feels for such abstract things like music, that will also persist as bliss in Devachan. The next point on Sinnett's list is, since the conscious perception of one's personality on earth is but an evanescent dream, that sense will be equally that of a dream in the Devachan, only 100-fold intensified. This is with reference to the long Devachan letter. To this, Master replies, pity you have not followed your quotation with personal commentaries. I fail to comprehend in what respect you object to the word dream. Of course, both bliss and misery are but a dream, and as they are purely spiritual, they are intensified. Now, see, bliss and misery, both are experienced by the mind. Okay, so Master equates them to a dream. Something which you are experiencing in your mind, it may not actually be there. So if their source is spiritual, if the source of bliss and misery, if it is spiritual, that is in the sixth principle, then they will persist in Devachan. And they are intensely experienced as compared to while the person lived, because they are spiritual. Love and hate, both of them can have a spiritual source. That is why they are so intensely felt. The bliss that you feel on earth, it is not even a fraction of what you will feel in the same thing that you will feel in Devachan. Okay, so not only he compares it to a dream, but he says in that dreamlike state, you are going to experience it very intensely. The next point which Sinnett raises, a connoisseur who passes aeons in the rapt delight of listening to divine symphonies by imaginary angelic choir and orchestras. This is with reference to that long letter. See my notes 10-11 about Wagner. What this means that a music lover, a person who was an ardent lover of music, in his devachanic state, he will be hearing blissful music while he passes into that state. And it will appear to him as if the angels in heaven, they are singing, the choir, the orchestra, all that heavenly scene is what he will have in his devachanic state. So Mahatma Ji has already explained this above, that even though each person is experiencing the same emotion of love, but he experiences love in different states. Okay. So again, a person who's fond of music will, yes, experience it in Devachan and fill it up with his own imagination or the dream. So here the dream is of a choir, of angelic choir. Okay. Choir is people together who are singing. Then we come to the last question, that is 12A and 12B. In 12A, Sinnett asks, in no case then, with the exception of suicides and shells, is there any possibility for any other to be attracted to a seance room? This is given in the notes. And in 12B, he asks, on margin, I said rarely, but I have not pronounced the word never. So this is in quotation. It means Mahatma Ji has written this, that on margin, I said rarely, but I have not pronounced the word never. Now, look at 12A. In 12A, he is saying, in no case then. That means in no case other than these two cases, anybody else can be attracted in the seance room. Nobody else can be attracted. And in the point 12B, he's saying that I said rarely, but I never pronounced the word never. So this is a point of confusion for Sinnett. So actually what had happened earlier, Sinnett had raised the doubt that the spiritualists were right. And the majority of seance room spooks, they were spirits. This was a point raised by Hume. And so this was the general thought prevailing at that time by the spiritualists. And masters wanted them to know that this is incorrect. So the teachings of septenary constitution of man and the after-death stages, they were being given out. Now, answering Hume's doubt, Master had written what is given in point 12A. That is what Master had written. That except for suicide cases and shells, none other could be attracted to the seance rooms. And Sinnett still had this doubt regarding this point. So Master clarifies that along with suicide cases and shells, he should also have added accident cases. Those accident cases who die still absorbed in some earthly passion. So that is an untimely death for somebody who dies in an accident. He still had lots of wishes and passions. They were not fulfilled and he died in an accident. So such cases, such entities also, they can be attracted to the seance room. But apart from these three types of entities, none other could communicate in the seance rooms. Then regarding the point number 12, Master says, one who says one day, in no case, then, etc., and a few days later denies having ever pronounced the word never is not only no adept, but must be either suffering from softening of the brain or some other accident. So this is pertaining to those 2 points, 12A and 12B. We will go back to the previous slide. In point number 12A, he is clearly saying in no case then. That means other than these cases, no other case. And then in point number B, he's saying that I said rarely, but I never said the word never. So this is clearly a contradiction, right? So Mahatma Ji is saying that no adept will make such contradictions. Okay, such a person is not only, he is not an adept, but he is suffering from some problem in his brain. On the margin, I said rarely, but I have not pronounced the word never. This point refers to the margin of the proof of your letter. Sinet had written some letter and it was referring to some other part of Sinet's letter, not pertaining to the point which was raised in 12a. So just because of such a simple misunderstanding, Hume and Sinet thought that Master is contradicting himself. At one time he's saying this nothing, no other cases. And in the second point he's saying that I never said no other cases. I said rarely. Okay. So this is a misunderstanding. Then the last point, to one sin though I do plead guilty. That sin was a very acute feeling of irritation against Mr. Hume upon receiving his triumphant statistical letter, the answer to which you found incorporated in yours when I wrote for you the material for your answer to Mr. Khandalawala's letter that you had sent back to HPB. So a lot of back references are there in this letter. Khandalawala's letter, if you remember, it is in reference to chronological letter number 70A, B and C. 70A and B were doubts raised by Sinet and Hume. And letter number 70C was Master's reply to them. Okay, so Hume was always trying to find fault in the Master's teachings. And in that same spirit, he had written that letter to the Mahatma. And this really irritated the Mahatma. That is what he is writing, that was a sin which he was guilty of, that he got irritated. The Master got irritated. He says that had I not been irritated, I would not have become guilty of the omission. So omission was that, the point 12a and b, which we saw. Point 12a was that the entities which can communicate in the seance room, they include suicide cases and the shells. What he omitted? He also omitted the accidental deaths which have some unfulfilled earthly passion. That he omitted. Okay. So why did he omit? That omission was just because he was so irritated with Hume. So had I not been irritated, I would not have become guilty of the omission. Perhaps. This now is my karma. I had no business to feel irritated or lose my temper. But that letter of his was, I believe, the 7th or the 8th of that kind, and received by me during that fortnight. So anybody, if he is constantly pestered by the same thing, will get irritated. Being an adept in some small matters, I do know that he, meaning Hume, what he really means, and that his meaning amounts to this. Were we to divulge to him the whole of our philosophy, leaving no inconsistency unexplained, it would still do no good whatever. Okay, because Hume was waiting to find mistakes in what the Mahatma is teaching. So even if Mahatmaji explained the entire philosophy to him, he would still not be satisfied. He would still not be happy about it. Now, earlier in the beginning of the letter, we saw Mahatmaji had explained that an adept is one only when he is exercising his occult powers. At the other times, he is just like any other, though he may possess very high degree of intuition. And we also know that HPB has described Mahatma KH as being very gentle, of a very gentle character, having a very strong will, being a logical and easygoing person, and taking a lot of pains to explain the philosophy to the other person, to make his meaning clear. Okay. But then why such a situation arose that Mahatmaji got irritated? That within the last 15 days, Hume wrote 7 to 8 letters to him of this kind, full of accusing and fault finding. And this is what irritated the Mahatma. And this resulted in the omission in his reply. Now, you see, he being a Mahatma, still on other times, he could lose his temper. But the same applies to us. We need to look at ourselves. When we become angry, we actually lose our power to think logically. I request you to mute your mics, all of you. Hanaji, may I request you to mute your mic, please? Okay. So we need to look at us when we become angry, we lose our power to think clearly. Decisions made at such time, they invariably result in mistakes or errors. And this becomes our karma, from which effect there is no escape. So Mahatma KH is well aware of Hume's nature. He will not be satisfied even if the entire occult doctrine was divulged to him, because his objections and arguments would still continue. And Mahatma Ji says in the end that it is an impossible task. So let it last until the whole breaks down under his own weight. That means let the events unfold as they are happening. By the doings of Hume itself, things will fall apart. And this completes the answers to all the points which were raised by Sinnett in letter number 85A. Then Mahatma Ji further ends the letter by saying, I will see to your scientific questions next week. I am not at home at present, but quite near to Darjeeling in the Lamassery, the object of poor HPB's longing. She always wanted to be there with the Mahatmas. So it was the object of her longing. Lamassery is the monastery for lamas. And probably Mahatma KH was attending some work of his at that monastery. So that's why he had written to Sinnett that he will answer his questions on the occult science later on. And Mahatma KH, he wanted to leave from that Lamassery by September, but he did not find it feasible due to Babu Nobin Banerjee's boy. If you remember that previous letter 81, before that letter 81, Hume had written quite a derogatory letter denouncing the Mahatmas and criticizing them publicly. And the Chauhan had given orders that Babu Nobin Banerjee's son, who was 14 years old, his name is Jyotirmay, he should be accepted as pupil in one of the Lamasseries near Chamto Dong, which is about 100 miles off Singatse. And Jyotirmay's sister, 18-year-old sister, Yogini, she would be at the female monastery of Pali. She would be admitted over there. So these were the Chauhan's orders. Why he gave those orders? Because he saw that things will not work out with Hume. Okay, so thus the founders in good time, they will have two witnesses and will not have to depend upon the caprice of Mr. Hume to kill and resurrect the Mahatmas at his leisure. That's what he had done by denouncing the Mahatmas. So because this person, Nobin Banerjee's son, he was there at that monastery, that is why Mahatma Ji could not leave. There would be some reason he would have to stay back for him. And also HPB, she was physically ailing. So Mahatma M, he would have to bring her to the Lamassery if she had to physically recover. The Mahatmas had these kind of powers where they could fix her. That is the term they have used, to fix her. So she would recover physically and continue her work on the physical plane. And at that time, Mahatma KH would also have a conversation with her in person. So that was another reason he was staying back at the Lamassery. Then he says goodbye for now. And now goodbye. I ask you again, do not frighten my little man. He may prove useful to you someday. Only do not forget, he is but an appearance. So this is reference to Babaji. Babaji, if you remember in the previous letter, he was the person who agreed for Darbagiri Nath to use his physical body. So Mahatma Ji says, remember, he is only an appearance. Though he is Babaji, but actually in that the soul is of Darbagiri Nath. So this is the end of letter 85A and B. Okay, now I will continue. We'll go to letter number 86. For that, I will share another slide. Full is of Garbhagirinath. This is the end of letter 85E. Thank you. Now I will continue. We'll go to okay, so now we'll move on to letter number 86. These two, letter number 86 and 87, they are very short letters, and there is no, technically there is no explicit philosophical teaching given. Only some circumstances of those times have been explained. So I'm just going to explain over here what the letter is saying. The Colonel Chesney, he was in the British Army. He was in the Bengal Engineers Group. And earlier he had shown an interest in the Theosophical Society, and he had written to Mahatma KH. But ultimately he lost interest and he stopped all association with the Theosophical Society. So Synod sent a message to Mahatma KH advising the master not to correspond with Colonel Chesney. But Mahatma Ji had already composed a reply for him, which was to be delivered by Babaji. So because Mahatma Ji considered it very rude not to reply, even though Colonel Chesney was no longer in sympathy with TS. But ultimately he leaves it to Synod's discretion, whether he wanted to forward that reply, the Mahatma's reply, to Colonel Chesney or not. And then he also mentioned about Fern to Synod. He says that decidedly young Fern is a little humbug and was a congenital, though often an irresponsible liar. So we know that Fern was Hume's secretary. He was somewhat of a psychic. Psychic meaning he had some clairvoyant abilities. And the Mahatmas considered that he could be useful for TS. He could become a center of their magnetism for transmission of the letters. And for this purpose, they had put him on probation under the supervision of Master M. Now, we also know that eventually he failed the probationary tests. So Mahatma KH knew that Fern was very deceptive, meaning humbug, and a compulsive liar. That means congenital. Compulsive liar. He cannot help it. He is going to lie about things. So congenital means some defect which is there from birth. So that is what he is, compulsive liar. He was the reason of much of the misunderstandings that were happening at that time. And he had even tried to deceive Mahatma M in his previous letter. Now, this person, Fern, had a huge influence on Hume. And whatever powers he imagined in himself, they were actually all imaginary powers. And Hume, he wanted to prove himself superior to the Mahatmas. So this was the situation. Hume wanted to find fault in the Mahatmas and prove himself superior. And Fern had all these imaginary powers and he would influence Hume, and he was trying to deceive the Mahatmas, and he was compulsively lying about things. So he says that he is a member of a society, a secret society, which does not employ deception. Now, why does he speak like that? That does not employ deception? Because in the probationary tests, the Mahatmas allow the Chelas to be deceived by appearances. Chelas have to utilize their own discretion, their own intuition. That is how it will unfold. So to the Western people, this seems like deception. Okay. And they did not like being tested, the probationary tests to which they were subject. That is why Fern says that he belongs to a secret society which does not employ deception in any form. And no member of the secret society knows who the other member is. And nor will he know till the real nature of brothers is made public. So this was the kind of falsity that he was circulating, Mr. Fern was circulating. And therefore Mahatma KH, he cautions Synod to be aware of Fern. And then he says that in light of whatever Fern is doing, Mahatma Ji does not blame his two indiscreet but half faithful lay chelas. Perhaps he is referring to human Synod, lay chelas. Now that Mr. Hume alienated the Chauhan and M, I remain alone to carry on the difficult work. Difficult work is to communicate with humans in it, give them the occult teachings, and work for the TS movement to succeed. So you read H's letter. How do you like the huge shadow of a yogi? Now, this yogi refers to Swami of Almora. So Hume, he had denounced the Mahatmas and he had turned for teachings to one Swami of Almora. And it seems that this Swami, he was not even a true yogi. And in fact, he was working against the Theosophical movement. Let me echo your sigh for the poor society, and before fading away again into the foggy distance between Shimla and Pariyong, assure you of my ever-friendly feelings for yourself, KH. So Pariyong is a large monastery in Tibet. It is just across the border from Sikkim. Probably Mahatma Ji was there at the time of writing this letter, and he shares his concern for the Theosophical Society with Synod. And the last point, Mr. W. Oxley wants to join the eclectic. Kindly write to him to say that he must not feel vexed at my denial. So William Oxley, we know he was a spiritualist. He had written a long letter to Mahatma KH, telling him about his spiritualistic contacts. And he also claimed that Mahatma KH visited him thrice astrally. We read about this in the previous letter. But actually, Mahatma had not visited him astrally, nor had any conversation with him. And at some point, Oxley wanted to join the Shimla Eclectic Theosophical Society, but Mahatma KH had refused him at first. However, now in the present letter, Mahatma Ji is writing to Synod. He says that Oxley must not feel vexed at my denial. I know he is thoroughly sincere and is incapable of a deception or even exaggeration as you are. So just like Synod is sincere, the same way Mr. Oxley is also very sincere, but he trusts too much to his subjects, meaning those spiritualistic contacts. Let him be cautious and very guarded, and if he joins the society, I may help and even correspond with him through you. So Mahatma Ji is now ready to have him in TS. He is a valuable man and indeed more worthy of sincere respect than any other spiritualistic mystic I know of. And though I have never approached him astrally or conversed with him, I have often examined him in thought. See, this is an important statement. I have often examined him in thought. Do not fail to write to him with the first steamer. So a person who expresses his interest and who may be useful to the cause of the Theosophical movement, then Mahatma Ji takes such a person under his watch. It is not necessary for the aspirant to know the Mahatma or to meet the Mahatma. The Mahatma can scrutinize his real nature mentally. So we do not know, we as members of the society, how many of us and those working sincerely for the TS, who Mahatma Ji is examining in his thought. Okay, so having that in mind, with that aspiration, we should work. With that sincerity, we should work. The good work that we do should be in the Master's name. So this is end of letter 86. Then we go to chronological letter 87. We still have about 15 minutes. I'll try to complete letter 87. Then we would have completed all letters from 83 to 87. This is also a very short letter. There are, and the date is not mentioned, but it is probably written around the same time, September of 1882. There are no philosophical teachings given in this, just the situation at that time. Mahatma Ji writes, it is positively distressing to find oneself so systematically misunderstood, one's intentions misconceived, and the whole plan imperiled by this endless hurrying on. Are we never then to be granted any credit for knowing what we are about, or allowed the benefit of the doubt in the absence of any reasonable proof whatever that we have determined to bar the progress of the Theosophical Society? So we have seen in these past letters, so many members with so many misunderstandings and fault finding and contradictions. All this was happening. Now, this and the clarifications on the same, all of this was being published in the Theosophist, the magazine, which was edited by Madame Blavatsky. And to add to this, Hume wrote 7-8 letters to Mahatma KH in a span of 15 days, full of complaints and fault finding. So nobody was working for the progress of the Theosophical Society, only complaining and fault finding. This was what was going on. And Mahatma Ji was quite exasperated by this situation. Mr. Hume maintains that he does not say KH or any brother is wrong. Withal, every line of his numerous letters to myself and HPB breathes the spirit of complaint and bitter accusation. I tell you, my good friend, he will never be satisfied, do what we may. So Mahatma Ji knew that he could not help Hume's attitude. It would remain the same. When we are reading these situations, when we are studying about the events and the happenings of that time, we should examine the current situation, the current times. How are we helping in the progress of the Theosophical Society, in the cause of the Theosophical Society? Are we barring the progress by our constant, these kind of disagreements or squabbles, even squabbles? Okay, that is the point which we need to take from here. And as we cannot consent to overflood the world at the risk of drowning them with a doctrine that has to be cautiously given out and bit by bit, like a too powerful tonic, which can kill as well as cure, the result will be a reaction in that insatiable craving of his. And then, well, you know yourself the consequence. So this is with reference to Hume's impatient nature. He wanted the whole of the occult doctrine given out to him. But Mahatma Ji says that the occult doctrine it is true that occult doctrine will lead you to the acme of knowledge, to the highest point of knowledge. But to receive such knowledge, the aspirant has to be ready. Only that much can be revealed as much as the aspirant is ready to receive. Now, suppose a student is studying in primary school and he wants to know the knowledge which is from the of the level of PhD or postgraduate. Will he even understand what is being told to him? Okay, so that was the kind of situation. When he says that only that much can be revealed as much as the aspirant is ready to receive. So this depends on the level of unfoldment of his consciousness. How much he can receive, how much he can understand and comprehend of the occult knowledge, it depends on the level of unfoldment of the aspirant. Now, else, if his consciousness is not unfolded, then even the most well-formulated teaching, it will just sound like gibberish to him, rubbish. He won't understand what it is. He gives the example of water. Water is the elixir of life. Water is what keeps you alive, but too much of it will become a flood. You can drown. Similarly, a powerful tonic in the right dose, it will cure the disease, but in excess, it will kill the diseased. Okay, instead of the disease, it will kill the patient. So the Mahatmas are very cautious in giving their teachings. Even now, so many people, so many members say that, okay, this is what was given by Madame Blavatsky and the Masters. What next? Why are we not receiving more teachings? The point is, have we studied and assimilated these teachings? Have we made it part of our life? Has it become a living knowledge? Meaning, are we applying it in our life? So once we are ready, then only more teachings can be revealed to us. And then the next point, the society will never perish as an institution, although branches and individuals in it may. Now, this is a very important statement, and it is a statement of great strength and great hope for all of us. See, it is a great strength in the sense that the brotherhood of adepts, they are the custodians of this eternal knowledge. Knowledge is eternal. The Mahatmas are the custodians. So in the evolutionary cycle, this knowledge may get hidden. It may become obscure. It may remain unexpressed, but it can never be lost. Okay, so that this is a great strength, that this knowledge will never be lost. And the great sense of hope is that in the previous 500-year cycle, as it was coming to a close, that was during that 1875 to 1900 period, this knowledge, this occult, eternal occult knowledge, it was revealed to mankind by the two Mahatmas, who we know are the inner founders of the society. So this society, the Theosophical Society, it represents an institution of that eternal knowledge. The Theosophical Society is an institution of that eternal knowledge whose protectors are the Mahatmas themselves. That is the reason this institution can never perish. All the same, to spread this knowledge, branches of TS came into being. Now, what are the branches? Branches are comprised of people who belong to all race, creed, sex, caste, and color. Okay. Depending on the readiness of these people who are there in the branches, depending on them to receive and comprehend these teachings, depending on their inner unfoldment, the branches or these individual members, they may continue in the society or they may drop out. Okay, that is the meaning that branches or individuals may perish, because they may either continue or they may drop out. But the institution as such, institution of eternal knowledge, it can never perish. These are the words of the Mahatmas, which give us great hope and courage to continue on this path. We must be left to judge for ourselves and be permitted to be the best judges. Everything will be explained and given out in good time, if we are but allowed our own ways. Otherwise, rather give up the eclectic. Now, what this means? We are aspirants, perhaps aspiring to become chelas. As an aspirant, we cannot demand. An aspirant has to accept what he is given by the master. And he is given as much as he deserves, as much as is due to him by his own merit. Now, the Eastern chelas, the chelas of the Mahatmas, they were well acquainted with this tenet. We know that so many chelas he had, T. Subbarao and Jwalkul and so many other chelas. The Eastern chelas are well acquainted with this tenet, that they have to gain anything by their merit and accept what the master says. The same common sense Mahatmaji is trying to instill in humans in it, because he's trying to teach them. So he's trying to tell them that the masters must be left to judge for themselves, and they are the best judges. They must be permitted to run the society, to decide what is best for them, how to give out the teachings. Everything will be explained to humans in it in good time, but in the way that Mahatmaji thinks is best fitted for them. Otherwise, they may leave the eclectic society. So this is the end of letter number 57. And with this, we come to an end to all our letters 83 to 87. Thank you so much. And although we have very less time now, I will request Meenakshi ji to give us the translation in Hindi.
Namaste. Thank you, sister. आज हम लेटर नंबर 85B 86-87 ले रहे हैं। 85B में सीनेट के मुद्दे पर मास्टर कहते हैं कि याद रखे, प्रत्येक भावना सापेक्ष होती है, न तो अच्छाई होती है, न बुराई, न खुशी और न ही दुख। एक व्याभिचारी का क्षणभंगुर परम सुख जो अपने कृत्य से पति के खुशी की हत्या करता है, उसका अपराधी स्वभाव जन्मजात नहीं होता है। यदि अंतश्चेतना का पछतावा परमानंद और सच्चे प्रेम के समय जो छठे और पांचवें तत्व से होती है, भले ही वह चौथे या कामरूप की इच्छा वासनाओं से प्रदूषित हो, इसके दौरान केवल एक बार भी यदि वह महसूस किया जाए तब यह पश्चाताप बना रहेगा और निरंतर शुद्ध प्रेम के दृश्यों के साथ रहेगा। अपने अंतश्चेतना और स्मृति की गहराइयों में तलाशे और यह देखने का प्रयास करें कि वे कौन से दृश्य हैं जो आप पर अपनी मजबूत पकड़ बना सकते हैं। जब एक बार फिर उनकी समक्षता में आप पाते हैं कि आप उन्हें फिर से जी रहे हैं और फिर जाल में फंसकर अन्य बातों के अलावा यह पत्र और बाकी सब कुछ आप भूल जाएंगे, क्योंकि आपके पुनर्जीवित जीवन की घटनाओं के दौरान यह परिदृश्य में बहुत बाद में आएगा। मुझे आपके गत जीवन को देखने का कोई अधिकार नहीं है। जब भी मैंने इसकी झलक देखी है तब सदा मैंने अपनी नजर फेर ली है, क्योंकि मुझे अभी के एपिसिनेट के साथ व्यवहार करना है, पहले वाले से नहीं। एपिसिनेट का अगला मुद्दा है नहीं, जिस पर मास्टर कहते हैं कि आपके भूतकाल से या आपके पूर्व जीवन से रैटिगन और रीड जैसे लोगों को बाहर निकालने पर, जो आपके साथ आपके पांचवें तत्व के निचले हिस्से की सीमाओं से परे है, काम से परे कभी नहीं गए हैं, तब यह जीवन के आंशिक स्मरण के अलावा क्या है? आपकी गर्द लाल पेंसिल से अंकित रेखाएं भी मिट जाती है। फिर आप इस तथ्य पर कैसे विवाद कर सकते हैं कि संगीत और स्वर संगति किसी वैगनर, पागानिनी, बावेरिया के राजा और कई अन्य सच्चे कलाकारों और गायकों के लिए है, जो प्रगाढ़ आंतरिक आत्मिक प्रेम और श्रद्धा का विषय है। मैं क्लॉज 9 में से एक शब्द भी नहीं बदलूंगा, ऐसा मास्टर कहते हैं। एपी सिनेट के अगले मुद्दे पर मास्टर कहते हैं कि निस्संदेह आनंद और दुख दोनों ही एक स्वप्न है, और चूंकि वे विशुद्ध रूप से आत्मिक आंतरिक स्वरूप के हैं, इसीलिए वे प्रगाढ़ होते हैं। सीनेट का अगला मुद्दा है, फिर किसी भी स्थिति में आत्महत्या वालों और शेल्स को छोड़कर किसी अन्य को सियांस रूम की ओर आकर्षित होने की कोई संभावना नहीं है। इस पर मास्टर कहते हैं कि मिस्टर ह्यूम ने अब हमारे शिक्षण को कुचलने के स्पष्ट इरादे से की गई स्टैटिस्टिकल कैलकुलेशन के बाद कहा कि आखिरकार अध्यात्मवादी सही थे और अधिकांश सियांस रूम के स्पूक्स स्पिरिट्स थे। उनके इन आक्षेपों का उत्तर देते समय मैंने यदि लिखा होता कि किसी भी स्थिति में आत्महत्या और शेल्स और उन दुर्घटनाओं के शिकार जो किसी सांसारिक तृष्णाओं से ओतप्रोत रहकर मर जाते हैं, उन्हें छोड़कर क्या किसी अन्य की कोई संभावना है? एपी सिनेट का अगला मुद्दा है कि मार्जिन पर मैंने कभी कभार यानी रेयरली ही लिखा था, लेकिन मैंने कभी नहीं, नेवर, इस शब्द का उच्चारण नहीं किया। इस मुद्दे पर मास्टर कहते हैं कि जो एक दिन कहता है किसी भी स्थिति में नहीं और कुछ दिनों बाद कभी कभी नहीं, इस शब्द का उच्चारण करने से इनकार करता है, वह एक सिद्ध पुरुष नहीं है। मार्जिन पर मैंने कभी कभार नहीं लिखा था, लेकिन मैंने कभी नहीं इस शब्द का उच्चारण नहीं किया। हालांकि एक गुनाह के लिए मैं अपना दोष स्वीकारता हूँ। मिस्टर ह्यूम का उन्मादपूर्ण स्टैटिस्टिकल पत्र प्राप्त करने पर उनके प्रति प्रचंड चिड़चिड़ाहट हुई थी। अगर मैं नहीं चिढ़ा होता तब मैं शायद भूल करने का दोषी नहीं बनता। अब यह मेरा कर्म है। मुझे चिढ़ने या अपना आपा खोने का कोई अधिकार नहीं है, लेकिन मुझे लगता है कि उनका वह पत्र उस पखवाड़े के दौरान मुझे प्राप्त हुआ 7वां या 8वां पत्र था। यदि हम मिस्टर ह्यूम को अपने संपूर्ण तत्वज्ञान के बारे में बता दें, जिसमें कोई भी विसंवाद स्पष्ट न छोड़ा गया हो, फिर भी इससे कोई लाभ नहीं होगा। मैं आपके मैं आपके साइंटिफिक प्रश्नों को अगले सप्ताह देखूंगा। इस समय मैं अपने घर नहीं हूँ, लेकिन दार्जिलिंग के काफी करीब एक लामासरी में हूँ, जहाँ बेचारी एचपीबी को आने की उत्कंठा है। संभवतः यदि मास्टर एम उन्हें यहाँ लाते हैं तब मुझे प्रत्यक्ष रूप से भेंट करनी होगी और उन्हें एचपीबी को लाना ही होगा या हमेशा के लिए उनके फिजिकल ट्रायड को खोना होगा। अगला पत्र है लेटर नंबर 86, जिसमें मास्टर कहते हैं कि कर्नल चेस्नी के पत्रों को प्रत्युत्तर न देना यह उचित नहीं लगता है, चाहे वे थियोसॉफी के आंदोलन को मानते हो या नहीं, लेकिन मैं इसे पूरी तरह से आप पर छोड़ता हूँ और आपसे विनती करता हूँ कि आप इस मामले में अपने विवेक को उपयोग करेंगे। निश्चित ही युवा फर्न थोड़ा पाखंडी है और उससे भी बदतर वह एक जन्मजात अविश्वसनीय झूठा है। जो कुछ भी घटित हुआ है उसमें इस व्यक्ति का हाथ है, उस पर नजर रखे और सावधान रहे। सोसाइटी की दयनीयता के प्रति आपकी कराह को मैं समझ सकता हूँ और शिमला और पेरियोंग के बीच के कोहरे में फिर से लुप्त होने से पहले मेरे आपके प्रति अपनी चिरकालीन मित्रता का आश्वासन देता हूँ। मिस्टर ऑक्सले एक्लेक्टिक में शामिल होना चाहते हैं। उनसे यह कहने के लिए लिखे कि उन्हें मेरे इनकार पर दुख न हो। मुझे पता है कि वे बहुत ही नेक है और आपकी ही तरह धोखा नहीं देंगे या अतिशयोक्ति नहीं करेंगे, लेकिन वे अपने अनुयायियों पर बहुत ही अधिक भरोसा करते हैं। उन्हें सतर्क और बहुत ही चौकन्ना रहने दे। यदि वे सोसाइटी में शामिल होते हैं तब मैं उन्हें मदद कर सकता हूँ और आपके माध्यम से उनके साथ पत्र व्यवहार कर सकता हूँ। और हालांकि मैंने कभी भी उनसे एस्ट्रल रूप से संपर्क नहीं किया या बातचीत नहीं की, मैंने अक्सर उन्हें विचारों में परखा है। अगला लेटर है लेटर नंबर 87। मास्टर कहते हैं कि अपने आप को इतने व्यवस्थित रूप से गलत समझा जाना, अपने उद्देश्यों के बारे में गलतफहमी होना और बेहद उतावलेपन के कारण पूरी योजना में अवरोध आना, यह बहुत ही पीड़ादायक है। क्या हमें फिर यह जानने के लिए कभी कोई श्रेय नहीं दिया जाएगा कि हम क्या कह रहे हैं, या हम किसी भी उचित प्रमाण के अभाव में यह संदेह होने दे कि हमने टीएस की प्रगति को थामने का निश्चय किया है। मिस्टर ह्यूम का कहना है कि वे यह नहीं कहते हैं कि केएच या कोई अन्य महात्मा गलत है, जबकि मुझे और एचपीबी को लिखे उनके कई पत्रों की हर पंक्ति शिकायत और कड़वे आरोप की भावना का हवाला देती है। चाहे हम कुछ भी कर ले, वह कभी भी संतुष्ट नहीं होंगे। और जैसे कि हम दुनिया को खतरे में डालने की जोखिम पर ऐसे सिद्धांत से सराबोर नहीं करना चाहते हैं जिसे एहतियात से दिया जाना चाहिए और एक बहुत ही शक्तिशाली टॉनिक की तरह थोड़ा थोड़ा करके देना चाहिए, जो उपचार के साथ साथ मारने का भी काम कर सकता है, परिणाम स्वरूप ह्यूम की अतृप्त लालसा इस पर भी प्रतिक्रिया करेगी और फिर आप स्वयं इसका नतीजा जानते हैं। एक संस्था के रूप में सोसाइटी का कभी अंत नहीं होगा, भले ही उसकी शाखाएं और सदस्य न रहे। थैंक यू। नमस्ते।
Thank you, Meenakshi ji, for this really such a good effort you are making to give us all this translation in Hindi. Thank you so much. And now, if there are any questions by anybody on all these letters, 83 to 87, you are free to discuss them. And if we don't have any questions in the participants, I have received by WhatsApp, I have received a query from Brother Sharma ji from Ujjain. It pertains to this letter. So I will discuss that question. The first point he has raised is, it is about the point number 5, which Sinet had raised. In that, it is mentioned, love and hate are the only immortal feelings. So I think this is now adequately explained that why love and hate are the only immortal feelings. Because these feelings, they may have their source in the 6th principle. that is in the Buddhic principle, which is the spiritual principle, and also it is the immortal principle, because it comprises or it falls in the higher triad, the upper triad. Okay, what perishes after death is the lower quaternary. So anything having its source in the upper triad, it will be immortal. And love and hate, they are the emotions which can have their source in the Buddhic principle or in the sixth principle. That is why they are immortal. So this was the first question. And the other question pertains to, there is a point where Mahatmaji discussed about the rounds and races, and Hume had accused him of inventing those rounds and races. So he says that the Orientalists, they have misunderstood the Eastern scriptures or the Eastern philosophies, and they have interpreted it according to their own ways. So to understand basically, and Mahatmaji also mentions that it is the duty of the Theosophist to show the ignorance of these world pundits, and they must give the correct doctrine, okay, regarding those rounds and races. Now, what actually I explained for that point is, HPP has mentioned that to understand the occult philosophy, it requires 7 keys. And the Western people, they don't have those keys. In fact, nobody has those keys in the present time, but they are somewhere, they are there. So what is it basically? These 7 keys to which I made a reference in that explanation. In the secret doctrine, variously, Madame Blavatsky has mentioned that these 7 keys, they are physiological key, the astronomical key, the symbolical key, theogonical key, geometrical, metaphysical, and mystical. Okay. To understand the mystery of the whole being, that is of the whole manifestation, whether macrocosm or microcosm, and everything that is there in that, it has to be interpreted through each of these 7 keys or 7 subsystems. And these systems, they are extremely complex. They are very difficult. She says that very few, even among the initiates, they could master all 7 keys. We are merely aspirants. Lay chelas is what master calls us. So we have no idea even of one complete key. We only know the knowledge that is given to us by the Mahatmas and Madame Blavatsky. Okay, so Madame Blavatsky has clearly mentioned that even among the initiates, very few could master all the 7 keys. And in truth, every one of the 7 keys has to be used in its right place. She's mentioning this in Secret Doctrine. These keys, they must never be mixed with each other. Otherwise, they will not be able to unveil the entire cycle of mysteries. Cycle of mysteries is this only, that about the manifestation. And we know that the manifested universe is septenary, and everything in it is septenary. Therefore, it is not improbable. It comes as no surprise that there should be 7 keys to unravel this mystery. And further, Madame Blavatsky also mentioned that it is maintained that India, not in its present limits, that means the present boundary, not this one, but including its ancient boundaries, at the time when it was Bharatvarsh and the boundaries spread from, I don't know, from maybe Indonesia right up to Iran, all that area, and even Himalayas and beyond it, all that area was under Bharatvarsh. So it is the only country in the world which still has among her sons, what it has? It has the adepts who have the knowledge of all the 7 subsystems and the keys to the entire system. So this entire region, which he delineated as India, amongst the adepts who are there here, some of them have this key to the entire system, all the 7 keys. Okay, and she says that our present day science, it has only one key, the key of matter, because it is materialistic science, right? So it studies only physical nature. But we know that the universe is manifested on 7 planes. So just by studying the physical plane or the key of matter, how can you unravel the entire mystery? Whereas the occult philosophy has all the 7 keys. Okay, so it can explain much more which science fails to explain. Now, this is what is meant by the 7 keys to understand any occult philosophy. Okay, and each of it has to be understood in its place. What I understand from the 7 keys is the physical, and then if you know the universe on the physical, do you know how it is on the astral plane? Do you know how it is manifested on mental plane? So in this way, at all 7 levels, how it is manifested, that is the mystery. So there have to be 7 keys. Now, the point which Brother Sharmaji mentioned is that 7 keys are also mentioned in Voice of Silence. Those keys, as per my understanding, they are mentioned there in context of attaining self-realization or nirvana, for attaining jnana. It says for reaching the other shore. And they are given as Dan, Shil, Shanti, Vairagya, Virya, Dhyan, and Pragya. So each of these 7 keys, they will open one of the 7 portals through which the aspirant has to travel on the path of knowledge. Okay, but so here we see the other keys for moving towards nirvana. And there we are talking about keys to unravel the manifesting of the universe. Okay, but ultimately when one attains nirvana or one attains self-realization, he possesses the whole knowledge of the whole mystery. So whether you travel this path or you travel that path, ultimately you reach that universal being and all that knowledge is yours. So this is what I have understood. If anyone would like to add in this about the 7 keys or the 7 portals, you are welcome to comment on it.
Thank you very much, madam.
Thank you, Sharmaji. Shindiji, are you saying something?
Yes, Vibhaji, very nicely we have explained the keys.
Namaste,
The only
sir.
namaste, namaste. Very nice. That is, see, altruism is the key to theosophy. Altruism is key to theosophy.
Yes.
So altruism is the paropakara, live for the others. That is the key to theosophy. And when you said 7 keys or 7 keys in Voice of the Silence, yes, you mentioned Dana, Sila, Kshanti, Vairagya, all those. There are, besides these 7 keys, the name is the same, but they are perfected 7 keys. So after Nirvana, there are 2 parts and there are perfected 7 keys. Same, title is the same, Dana, Sila, Kshanti, the golden keys, but they are perfected one. So the keys are also getting perfected as we move forward. That is what it is said in Buddhic literature. So there were 7 keys and also 7 portals and perfected 7 portals, and they are golden keys. But the only key that we know, altruism is the key to theosophy. That is what I want to add in it. That is enough for us. Right.
Very true. Very true. Thank you, sir.
Vibhaji, namaste.
Yes, namaste.
I have a question. What is 8 sphere? Then another one is hatred. You said hatred comes from Buddhic plane. Buddhic. We know that Buddhic plane is full of love.
Yes.
Then how hatred comes from the Buddhic plane or Buddhi?
Sorry, your voice is breaking. Mitalini ji, can you please phrase your question again?
Okay. First question is what is 8 sphere?
8 sphere. Okay.
Okay. It is clear?
Yes.
Now it is clear. Okay. Then second is you said hatred comes from the Buddhic plane, love and hatred, both. But we know that Buddhic plane is full of love only. No place of hatred. No place of hatred. Please clear it.
please.
Okay. So this was a point even during when we were studying the letter, I had mentioned. I will explain it again. First, we'll go to the question, what is eighth sphere? So eighth sphere has been mentioned as avicii. Avicii is a state of where the link between the upper triad and the lower self is broken, even during the lifetime of the person. So there is no spiritual light to guide the personality of the person. And after death, now after death, what happens that the higher principles and the lower principles have to separate. So whatever was good and noble in the life of the person, that gets assimilated to the buddhi. That means the higher mind gets assimilated to the buddhi, forming the ego, atma, buddhi, manas, which will go into devachan. But a person who has lived such a life of evil, there is nothing good in his life which can be assimilated with the buddhi. So his entire manas is enmeshed with his selfishness, with his desire, his passion, and his calm. Okay, so there is no part of manas which is assimilated into buddhi to go into devachan. Entire manas goes into calm roop, and that is his state of suffering and misery, because he is reliving those passions again and again. Okay, so this state is called avicii. Avicii and devachan, they both are mental states and they are polar opposites. Just like devachan is the state of bliss, so this avicii is the state of misery, and this is the state of misery. This is called the eighth sphere. This is what I have understood from the Mahatma letters. Perhaps someone might have something else to talk about the eighth sphere. So you are welcome to say about that. Meanwhile, I will also answer your next question, which is about when Mahatma Ji mentions that love and hate are immortal feelings. And the Buddhic principle, the sixth principle, it is, we know it is full of love. Then how we can have hate coming from the sixth principle? So this came as somewhat of a surprise to me also when I studied the Mahatma letters. But on close studying, what I found, in one place he mentioned that the human soul is one, that is manas. And it is polar, meaning upper pole, lower pole. So this love and hate, they are nothing but polarities of our soul. So soul is one only, and these are the polarities. Now, if we experience love, it means it is the upper pole of our soul, which is moving towards buddhi. And if we experience hate, that means the soul, it is moving towards selfishness, selfish desire. Okay. Now, love and hate, they can have many flavors. Like we saw in the letter, love can be experienced differently by different people. Same way, hate can also be experienced differently by different people. And the example which Mahatma Ji gave is about guilt. Guilt is also a form of hate, hate for own self. The person knows that he has done something wrong and still he does it. And then he feels guilty about it. So this is a kind of hate for his own self. And this guilt, it comes from the conscious. And Mahatma Ji clearly mentioned that conscious is the sixth principle, the Buddhic principle. So if guilt is coming from that, guilt which is coming from the conscious, it means it has its source in buddhi, in the Buddhic principle. And that is why it is immortal. It will be experienced in devachan, just like the moment of bliss will also be experienced. So love can have different flavors like compassion, sympathy, empathy. Same way, hate can also have its different flavors. In this case, we saw guilt. Guilt is also nothing but, actually, it is a kind of hate only. So I hope, Mitalini ji, I have clarified this to some extent.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Therefore, Vibhaji,
Yes, sir.
we invoke. Therefore, Vibhaji, we invoke, lead me from darkness to light.
Yes.
Because the darkness and light are not different. Both are same, but still we say, lead me from darkness to light. In the same way, lead me from hate to love. We have this immortal thing within us. So we are invoking, lead me from hate to love. Love is that pole where we are directed our focus. That is what we invoke in all these things.
Very true.
You are very truly explained. Thank you for that.
Thank you, sir. While studying that, and Mitalini ji, it is true, many people will have this doubt and question in the mind that how hate can come from a spiritual principle like buddhi. But this is the only thing we need to understand, I think, about the polarity. And another point which, when I was thinking, after reading, I was thinking about these letters and what was written. The point which comes to my mind is that the polarities, they exist in the world due to multiplicity. Multiplicity, and the polar opposite of that is unity. So the more we will move towards unity, we will move towards love. And the more we move towards multiplicity, that is separation, then that the selfishness comes in, which leads towards hate. So these are basically the two polar dimensions of manifestation. Manifestation could not come into being without multiplicity. Therefore, this universe, it is pervaded by duality. That means with polar opposites. But actually, they are one only. There is only the one absolute, only the one element which is manifesting everywhere. And it has become polar. So I think this is a point of contemplation for all of us. And thank you so much for joining me in this long, long discussion. Any other question, if anyone may have, or then we can close the session. Okay. So please join me in the closing prayer. Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Sarvesham Swastir Bhavatu Sarvesham Shantir Bhavatu Sarvesham Purnam Bhavatu Sarvesham Mangalam Bhavatu Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah Sarve Santu Niramaya Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschit Dukha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Namaste and thank you to all of you.
Thank you, Vibhaji. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.